Hey everyone, and welcome to this Bald Eagle play-by-play, our very first on explore.org. So we welcome you no matter where you happen to be around the world. This is brought to you by explore.org and the Raptor Resource Project. My name is Mike Fitz. I'm the resident naturalist with explore.org, the world's largest live nature cam network. And joining me today are my co-hosts from the Raptor Resource Project. First, let's welcome in Amy Reese. Amy, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing just great.
Well, glad to have you along. I'm really looking forward to learning about eagles and other birds with you and our other co-host. We're also joined by John Howell. John, thanks for being here. I know the time of day isn't the most convenient for you right now, but you made the effort and you're here with us.
Hey, you're welcome. Glad to be here, Mike.
So, this is a bald eagle play-by-play. If you've watched the bear cam play-by-plays from Katmai National Park on explore.org, you'll see some similarities in the style of this program. We'll look at live footage of bald eagles through the Raptor resource cams on explore.org. We're going to try to describe what we see in the behavior and biology of the birds. We'll try to examine some recent events seen on the cameras, including some non-eagle cams that we have online in partnership with the Raptor Resource Project. And finally, we're going to try to answer some audience questions that were submitted in advance. So please be sure to submit your questions for future Bald Eagle play-by-plays through Ask Your Bald Eagle question. That's a form, just a Google form that we set up, and you can ask a moderator in the chat for the link to it. And thanks to everybody who sent in their questions so far. There was a lot, far too many for us to answer in this program today, but we did look, or at least I looked at all of them and tried to get a bunch of them that were representative of what people are wondering about. To begin, however, if you're curious about the location of explore.org's cameras in partnership with the Raptor Resource Project, let's take a quick tour, take a look at where those are located at. We're traveling to the upper Mississippi region of Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. The Decorah North Bald Eagle Nest is located on private property north of Decorah, Iowa. Heading farther north, we watch a peregrine falcon eyrie at Great Spirit Bluff on the Minnesota side of the river. Then the Mississippi Flyway Cam sits nearby in the river's floodplain within the upper Mississippi National Fish and Wildlife Refuge. And then staying on the Wisconsin side, the Trempealeau Eagles make their home on private property near Trempealeau, Wisconsin. And finally, Castle Rock is home to a peregrine falcon eyrie as well. And there's been lots of activity going on there. I'll throw it out to my co-host next, Amy. John, we want to stick with Decorah North right here, or go to a different cam to begin our program?
We can certainly give an update on the Decorah North Nest. Just a tough year, especially after such a great year last year with the two eaglets that we got to watch and hatch. It looked very promising.
Yeah, so let's maybe just give an update on the nest. I know a lot of people have been watching. We were expecting to see two eaglets in the nest by now, and things were going quite well, even through like some really cold weather and a snowstorm on March 20. We were seeing the parents protecting the eggs there, and we were even seeing one of the eagles begin to hatch out of the shell there. And I think this is maybe footage from early March. But the eaglet that began to hatch didn't emerge from the shell. It did not survive. It seems like the second egg is not viable. I know a lot of people have been wondering about this situation. What could have happened there? Maybe what went wrong with the egg? And we did have a bunch of questions about that. Amy, I guess I'll ask you this. You know, Lisa wrote in and was wondering, do we know what was the cause of DN19 and DN20 not making it into the world?
We don't know. Mr. North disposed of DN19, so we're not going to be able to learn anything from that. We're hoping to get DN20's egg and have that necropsied and maybe tested to look at causes, because there's been a lot of speculations. Could it be avian influenza? Could it have been some kind of injury? Did it have something to do with cold and snow? You know, I will say from my perspective, but again, we don't know, right? It's odd to me that both eggs in the nest failed versus just DN19 and DN20 hatching normally. And of course, we've seen the eagles cope with a lot of snow and cold there before. So I can't say those aren't factors, but that to me is an interesting piece of the puzzle, and one of the reasons we really want to recover the egg. We got asked specifically about humidity. So is more or less humidity better? And I mean, it's the right amount of humidity is important, right? So water diffuses through the eggs, pores throughout incubation, so it's not right at hatch or right at laying. And humidity affects the loss of water from the eggs. So when the embryos grow, right, they produce metabolic water like we do, and it's got to leave the egg, just like water has to leave a growing human fetus. So it diffuses out through the pores. If the humidity is too high, the egg gets too wet and the embryo more or less drowns. If it's too dry, there's not enough water and it can't develop. So we don't think it was probably a humidity issue. One of the reasons eagles get off their eggs and get on their eggs and move them around and so on and so forth is to help assure that the humidity is correct for water loss from the egg. We don't think that's a factor because DN19 lived long enough to start hatching. If too much humidity or too little humidity had been a factor early on, especially in incubation, we never would have gotten there. So we don't know, but we don't think so.
Yeah, and it's always amazing to me to see how well adapted bald eagles and other birds really are how well adapted they are to tolerating extremes of weather and protecting their offspring, protecting their eggs in those situations. I mean, John, we were seeing, this earlier, this year, earlier in March, the eagles sitting through snowstorms. We could, if we maybe just go for a moment to the Trempealeau nest. I mean, they were covered in snow as well, along with the Decorah North eagles. And John, they just persevere through it. They were remarkably well adapted to those situations.
They do. It is amazing. It's really cool to watch the bald eagle, how well insulated they are, and how even I remember watching. There were a couple periods where you can't tell with the snow down, but their wings are a little bit extended even to try to help when they do finally rise from that snow that's on top of them. They will shed that by folding their wings out and then shaking. So the actions that they do in preparation and then when moving that snow off of the top of them and their incubating eggs is amazing to watch. You're going to see that right now. At the North Nest, we've had up to a foot of snow through one snowstorm, I think it was about 2-3 years ago, where we had both eggs hatch successfully through that snowstorm with over a foot of snow on Mr. North and DNF at that time.
We still have in that North Nest, there's still one egg there. And right before we went live for our broadcast, there was an eagle in the nest. I think it had been Mr. North for a long time. I'm not sure if he was there right before we went live, but somebody was wondering, actually, I'll look at the question here. Cheryl was wondering, since the Decorah North Nest is deemed failed, how much longer will the parents continue sitting on the egg? Amy, do you have any estimate on how long we might see incubation continue?
We're not sure because we haven't seen this with eagles before, but I can tell you that with peregrine falcons, we've seen them sit as long as 3 weeks after the egg should have hatched. So he could be there for a while if the egg remains intact.
Yeah, and it looks like we're seeing a fairly extended period now, just since we've been together here, that there has not been an adult on the nest. So we might be seeing part of that transition play out right now.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting point. I imagine for bald eagles, and KT, maybe we could go to some live footage of an eagle incubating its nest over at Trempealeau right now. I imagine that for eagles, it's not like an on-off switch. Like they are in this mode where their entire instinct is to protect this egg until it hatches. So that's just their mindset, and they can't just switch it off on like day 40 or 42 or whatever. It's probably just a slow transition out of that process. Let's take this opportunity now, since we're on the Tremolo nest, to introduce this pair to you if you're not familiar with them. We are on hatch watch for them, I think, starting at the end of this week, maybe around April 9 or so. Amy, I'm curious about the behavior of parents during hatching. So if we're going to be watching this camera on April 9, we're going to be watching really closely for signs that maybe the egg is hatching. Is there going to be any behavioral cues from the parents that might indicate, if we can't see the egg, that might indicate that something's going on down there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So 2 or 3 days before hatching, the chick should reach the air cell, and then it'll start vocalizing, and the parents will vocalize back. It's very, very faint, and it can be hard to hear, especially if you've got a lot of other birds singing in the background. But listen for that and look for the parents to be paying extra attention to the eggs, maybe putting their heads down, appearing to listen, appearing to softly vocalize back. So you want to look for all of those things. And then if the eggs hatch and the parents, like let's say it's cold out, are sitting on top of them and not giving us many glimpses, they'll often sit up just a little bit higher, so you can look for that as well. Although usually we'll get a good glimpse, say if hatch happens like in the evening or after dark. In the morning when the incubation or brooding, because we have a hatch, happens, we'll generally see it then. But before that, look for the parents to pay attention to the eggs and listen for vocalizations.
And John, I think you were mentioning to me in a previous conversation sometime that that the vocalizations of the parents calling to the hatching chicks correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe that's something we've learned by watching the webcams and listening very carefully, looking at the behavior of the birds and listening to what they're doing in those moments. Because if you're down on the ground observing it from the distance, it's probably not something that you can hear or see.
Right, and with the really detailed audio that we're getting from most of these nests, we can hear a lot of that process happening. Even several years now, we've been able to hear the chirps of the female eagle while she's having contractions in labor. So some amazing audio that's coming through. I think typically I'm hearing more coming from the eaglet, from the egg. And definitely that interaction of rolling the eggs more often. They're getting up and down and looking at the eggs and moving them around, doing their characteristic beak anchoring and settling back down with the brood patch on top of those eggs. But as Amy mentioned, it does seem like they know what's going on, and they're not quite sitting down as tight onto those eggs for a good chunk of the time, right about that hatch time. Unless the weather is the way it has been some of these snowstorms, then they're usually hunkered down pretty tight.
They seem to fidget with their nesting material quite a bit too. We see it during what you've nicknamed the nestoration process. Part of that pair bonding that happens like in the fall before they begin copulating and before they begin laying eggs. But even now, in the middle of the in the incubation period, we just saw it from this bird. They're always, not always, but they're frequently just sort of prodding the nesting material, like they're always maybe fine tuning its appearance or its fluff. Is that something that you've picked up on as well?
Well, I have to say that
they're building
absolutely, and I think there's some fine tuning, but also, I mean, I know it's a little anthropomorphic, but I think they get bored. Years ago, we were collecting footage for Spring Watch BBC, and we were looking at peregrine falcons, not eagles. And, they were like, why do they keep playing with the gravel? They play with the gravel constantly. Well, they don't normally spend all of their time sitting, and it gives them something to do.
Do we know? I'm not so great at identifying the male and the female of this nest. Do we know which bird this is? If this is Mr. or Mrs. T here?
Looks like Mrs. T. A little bit more pronounced brow ridge, and um, I think I'm with the picture. I think you can tell some of that little darker the feathers in the orbital and the eye socket of her. That's characteristic in the females. A little bit more white head on some of the males.
And in fact, that brings up an audience question. Margaret wrote in and was wondering, what is the best way to identify male and female eagles? It can be challenging, especially if you're just tuning into the webcams for the first time. So, Amy, what are some of your go-to sort of tips or tricks to identify a male versus a female?
Well, I figure everybody knows about size, right? The female's bigger than the male, and when they're together, that's really, really visible. John mentioned the grayer feathers on the female's head. That's pretty consistent. The deeper brow ridge is pretty consistent. Females tend to have larger, longer beaks, so I'll look for that. Sometimes it's really easy, but sometimes it's hard. Lower light can make it tougher. If it's raining a lot, it can make it tougher. But generally, head shape, beak shape, and size, and sort of head flatter on the females, rounder on the males, can be really helpful especially if you can't use size overall as a comparison, if they're not perched together.
And John, we were also talking, a while back about, differences in the iris of the birds. I think it's pronounced the sear, so sort of like the skin-like part that's really kind of like right up against their face of their beak, and how that can be very different. I think it's, from a distance, you look at a bald eagle, our eyesight it really does suck compared to theirs, but I think they can probably discern these really fine details
Right.
between one another.
Yeah, when we've got eagles and our cams are close to the nest, like at Trempealeau right now, and other years at Decorah and N1 and N2B nests, we can zoom in close enough to see the individual details of the iris of the eyes, little imperfections and things like that. And like as you mentioned, just the structure of the nair and parts of the creases in the beak, and so it's an easy way for us to identify exactly which eagle is there. Now, that's given us some trouble in trying to figure out what's going on at the Decorah fish hatchery nest, because hatchery mom and hatchery dad are up over the top of that bluff, and they've been nesting in a tree there that is far away from cams. So that long distance, it's almost impossible to tell other than by some behaviors. The cam operators are good at that, but it's really tough to tell, like in the situation where we had the eagle that died the other day. It's just hard to tell which one. Was it one of the pair, HM or HD or not, but very neat that we can see that kind of detail when we've got cameras up close to the nest.
Yeah, and speaking of the main Decorah hatchery territory did have a few questions that came in on those. So there's no active eagle nest that we can see on the cameras really well. There's some geese in that area that have been in some abandoned eagle nests, and I think that's a point of interest that we can get to in a little bit. But since we're talking about eagles right now, Sheila was wondering about that dead eagle at the Decorah North territory, or excuse me, the Decorah Eagles hatchery territory. Sheila wrote in and said, RRP retrieved the dead eagle and reported that it might have been HM. Since then, on April 1, we saw a pair perched in the trees near the bluffs. Could that have been HM and HD? Their last known nest was in that area, I understand. So, Amy, what do we know, and what don't we know about the eagle that was found dead in that area?
So our master bander, Dave Kester, collected the dead eagle, and we sent it for testing to, I believe it's the Ames Wildlife or Ames Wildlife Health Veterinary Center in Ames, Iowa. Preliminary testing indicates that it didn't have avian influenza, although the doctor we're working with is going to do some additional testing to make sure, and then also to rule out other potential causes. John had discussed lead at one point. We certainly know that that kills eagles. And then there are some other diseases and conditions out there that maybe could be responsible. We're really, really looking forward to seeing if they can find anything out. Sometimes they can't, but there are things that can be ruled out, like avian influenza or lead or injury, right? So we're looking forward to that. Other than that, it's really hard to say. Our camera operators have done a great job. Dave's gone out there to try to figure out what's going on. And really all we know at this point is that an eagle we're almost certain is HD is perching with another eagle that's a female. We don't know whether that's HM or not. It also appears that the nest probably failed. And again, because we can't see into this, we're only basing this on behavior, but based on behavior. So the last time we saw HM and HD perched together was, I think, February 7th, 8th, 9th, somewhere in there, right? Then we only see one at a time, which would be consistent with incubation. Then this eagle turns up and dies of an unknown cause, and then HD is perched with another female. So it looks like the nest had been successful at one point and then probably failed about the same time that this female eagle disappeared. So that's the extent of what we know now. Hopefully we'll learn more when the necropsy is done.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I want to get, there's a couple other questions regarding that situation. Maybe before we get back to that, though, let's take advantage of talking about just the level of detail that we can see through our camera operators here, doing great work with our nests here. And we're still looking at the Trempealeau nest in Trempealeau, Wisconsin. Do either of you, sometimes when I see, close-ups of an eagle like this, I wonder just what's it really like to be able to see through their eyes, because they're from what we know about their eyes, I mean, they are truly superior organs to capture light compared to ours. Our eyes are not, nothing to slouch at, and our color vision is generally pretty good. But birds, have it much better, and is so. When I see this, I kind of wonder: is it like just like wearing binoculars on your head all the time and being able to focus up close near you? There's some limitations, of course, in eagle eyesight, but I'm wondering about what you think about when you're gazing, into the eyes of a raptor like this.
Yeah, I can speak for that. This specific case is a great example. We just were watching Hatchery or Mrs. T there, and you could see her cocking her head to the side a little bit. And I know from just that territory that out on one of the near islands there is another fairly large eagle nest, and then all the way over on the Minnesota side in one of the valleys there's another nest there. So she can see that far. She can see fairly good detail. What's happening with those other nests. She's keeping her eyes open for Mr. T and a break or two that might be coming up, and she's got a pretty good idea of, is he nearby, from vocalizations and calling back and forth, and then just probably more so even her visual capabilities. So I guess what I think is just awe of what they can see, and definitely wish I could see that well.
And what do you think about that, Amy? Is there, when you're able to look at an eagle and see it turning its head, one place to another, are you ever kind of thinking about, hey, what are you really seeing? What are you seeing beyond maybe what a human is capable of seeing in that same, if we were put in that same situation?
I absolutely wonder what they're seeing, what they're perceiving that I can't perceive, and then how they're thinking about it or engaging with it, what the world looks like to them, not only in sense of sight, but in all their other senses and in how they respond to it. There's a fascinating passage in, I think it's J.A. Baker's The Peregrine, about the way a peregrine perceives things. swelling and fading and receding and coming towards it. And I think about that actually a lot when I watch eagles and falcons, because I think not only is their vision that much better than ours is, like, I don't know, sort of a combination HD camera, binocular, telescope that they can use all at the same time with this extra color, right? But also then what do they do with that information? And I'm fascinated every time we see something like this.
Every once in a while, we can see a little bit of the nictating membrane too. So they have essentially a third eyelid there. John, can you talk about there? I think that, yeah, a little bit. We can see a little bit of it here and there. Can you talk about the adaptive advantage of having that nictating membrane?
It definitely helps them with just keeping the eyeball in a condition that it needs to be. You can see a lot of times, well, the raptors in sleeping with their sleep capabilities, they may close one eye just because of the wind or whatever, and that's full eyelid. But a lot of times you'll see the nictating membrane come down and protect that eyelid, even when the eye socket and the main lid are actually open. So it's just that extra layer of protection that they've got for the elements, or they might be rooting around down in that nest with grasses and other things like that that might pop down for protection, or with the full lid. It's really hard to tell, but it's another interesting component of their biology and the mechanics of their eye that we don't have.
And Amy, hopefully in this nest, during our next play-by-play coming up in a couple of weeks, we'll have one or more eaglets to watch. And despite eagles having amazing eyesight, they have a blind spot kind of right in front of them too. And I think that it seems like it's challenging for them to feed those, especially those newly hatched eaglets who aren't quite great at at grasping yet. It seems like mom and dad are always kind of like, here it is, can you take it? We can't quite see where we're going, but we know about where we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, their beaks are very sensitive. Like, they look so hard. You think, well, they're probably not sensitive, but they have pressure sensors and temperature sensors, and they use those when the young are just starting to stick their heads up. Those little wavy, weak bobble heads. They will use those sensors to feed the young, and the young also don't need that much food immediately after hatch. I mean, they need food, right? But they don't need the copious amounts that they're going to require later as they grow. So I think that probably also assists them. Because if you look at the first, maybe 1 or 2 days, the young can't hold their heads up. They're not very good at grabbing things. They're probably seeing things, but again, they don't really know what to do with that information. But by 4 or 5 days, they've already made great strides in being able to see food and try to get food, right? But those sensitive beaks are really helpful during the first couple days when their beak blinders are preventing them from using their eyes to see as they feed their eaglets.
And if you're just joining us right now, thanks for being here. We're about halfway through our broadcast. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org. I'm talking with my co-hosts, John Howe and Amy Reese from the Raptor Resource Project. So we're looking at live footage right now of the Trempealeau eagles in Trempealeau, Wisconsin. We have some other nests to look at, and a lot of audience questions that came in advance about some of these other places. We have some eagle nests at a fish hatchery in Decorah, Iowa, that are not occupied by eagles right now, but they've been utilized over the past few years by Canada geese. So KT, maybe we'll head there right now. We just have a goose, mother goose nesting in one of the nests that we can look at. But a lot of people are surprised to find Canada geese, nesting in trees, Amy. And I know that's something that that you were maybe thinking if we had the time to talk about. So yeah, it's a bit of a surprise, but in a sense, it also should not be a surprise. Maybe it's just a matter of perspective. Based on how uncommon eagle nests were during the 20th century.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, when they first started doing it, right, it was what are they doing up there? Because we're so used to seeing geese nesting on the ground. But if you think about that, eagles were also gone for a very, very long time. So if you look way back in the historical records that we have, they recorded in 1804 as part of the Lewis and Clark expedition. There was a naturalist named Tyson Ramsey who recorded them in Council Bluffs, Iowa back in 1820. It was recorded in 1928 in Yellowstone and Montana's Flathead Valley in 55 and so on and so forth, right? But at the same time, eagles were disappearing. So eagles vanished from Iowa in 1905, from Illinois in the early 1900s. In 1963, there were just 417 pairs nesting in the lower 48 states, and most of those were in northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, and northern Maine. So they weren't where people were. So they just weren't around for us to see this behavior. When eagles start coming back, so the first pair returns to Iowa in, I think, 1977. They start building nests. Geese are coming back at the same time. That's hard to believe now when they're like carp of the sky. I mean, I like them, right? But some people don't. So all of these things are sort of happening together. And as we get more eagles and more abandoned eagles' nests and more geese, we see this resumption of a very, very old behavior that to us is completely new, but that to geese instinctually makes sense. Because you can lose goslings, and we generally lose maybe about one a year, right? You can lose goslings jumping from the nest, but that's better than having whole clutches wiped out by ground-based predators, and that's what tree nesting prevents. Cool behavior,
We and we do have more than one nest in this location. People were kind of wondering about the nest locations in this area, and I still have to like look at maps and things like that to keep it straight. John, we did have like a little map that we could pull up. Could you explain sort of like the location of these cameras and where these nests are in relation to one another?
Yeah, so we were just watching Mother Goose at the N1 nest, and if you look in that kind of map that we're looking at right now on screen, there's almost a virtual cross there in the middle with Trout Run Road, and then vertical road crossing that right by the hatchery. So in that northwest quadrant is the original Decorah eagle nest that was brought to the public, and that's where we watched Mom and Dad Decorah for many years, starting earlier before 2011, but that's when most people started watching when that cam went viral. So that nest, they did move in 2012 across the highway over to N2, which is listed on there. Nested there for several years until 2015 when that nest came down in microburst. And unfortunately, that year was the same year that our founder Bob Anderson passed away. We came together and rebuilt a starter nest by there, N2B, and we had successful nesting of Mom and Dad Decorah there until Dad disappeared in 2018, and then we had a new male there, DM2. Several successful years of nesting there, and then DM2 and Mom moved off over to the east about a mile and a half over towards the Upper Iowa River, and have built nest over there and have been there since. We know that we think Mom and DM2 are nesting over there right now. So just real recently, we had a new pair of eagles come into the territory, Hatchery Mom and Hatchery Dad, and they nested for 1 year successfully in N1, and then moved up over. There's a new nest that's, I believe, depicted on that up on the bluff there that they've been nesting in. H5, I think we've been referring to it now. So we talked a little bit earlier about them and the success that's there, but since that year that N2B was abandoned by Mom and DM2, and except for that 1 year where Hatchery Mom and Hatchery Dad came in and nested at N1, we have had at least 2 to 3 and even 4 couples of geese that have been nesting high up. Right on the bluff, we have a pair that nests up on the rocks up there. We had one in N2B moving further to the west, then we had geese in N1, And then further along up the creek, there's a rock face over there that we had geese one year too. So in recent years, we've had as many as 4 Canadian geese pairs that have been nesting up in high places or unused eagle nests, and really think that they actually are kind of defending these nests as theirs. We've been looking earlier in the year. There were some eagle and geese altercations, and they were close to each other. So it's like, are they actually defending these nests and keeping some of the eagles out of there? Hard to tell.
And let's look back at that one goose nest right now that we have live on our cameras, because I wanted, I got word maybe like 10 minutes ago or something that not I don't think in this nest, but in the N1 nest in the same area that there was an intruder goose that dumped an egg in that nest. So there's now 7 eggs in that nest. 6 of them from the mom who lays claim on it, and then a 7th from a goose who's just looking to maybe spread her genes in a different manner. Amy, this is not the first time we've seen something like that with geese nests. It seems like they protect their nests not only from predators, but also from other geese who might want to come in and not only take over the nest, but maybe just like lay an egg there and say, okay, take care of my kid, thanks.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting behavior because with the way geese work, they're precocial birds, right? So they leave the nest usually within about 48 hours of hatch. If you don't hatch, you're probably not going to hatch, right? So you would have to have the timing, I think, a little bit better than this goose had it. But when they feel compelled, when they have an egg, I guess, in the tube, right? It's got to be laid somewhere. So they're just going to try to lay it in another goose's nest if they don't have their own nest. And there could be any number of reasons they don't have a nest. So my guess would be this goose just probably doesn't have a nest, but did have an egg and it had to go somewhere. It most likely won't hatch.
Now, while we've been talking about these other nests, we did have a bird return to the Decorah North nest, and we had a bird leave the Trempealeau nest. It's kind of a common question, I think, that we get a lot of time. I see it in the comments on Explode.org. I'm sure the two of you get it a lot. It's not something that I think was asked specifically, at least it's not on my list here right now. But people often wonder, like, how long can eggs go without being incubated? And I think it varies quite a lot depending on the age of the egg and the air temperature. But John, in general, though, at this stage, Katie, maybe if we could go back to the Trempealeau nest real quick because those eggs are exposed. John, if you, in general, though, like at this stage, so pretty late in the nesting period, expected hatch within a week or so. On a day with just moderate temperatures today, not really too hot, not too cold. These eggs, how long could they be exposed and stay viable?
There's quite a bit of residual heat in the egg itself and that nesting material around it. And if the weather is fairly warm relatively, I'd say for this time of year, in the 40, 50, and it's been kind of crazy, but lately we've been getting spikes in temperatures up into the 60s, 70s, and even 80s. In this time of year, which is unusual, but they could sit, I'm sure, for several hours without attendance. We've seen out on some of the West Coast nests, though, that predators can come in and some things can happen. So we don't usually see them gone for that long unless there's a good reason. We've seen some of the adults leave the area because of maybe some smoke or some other something that pushes them out of the nest, or it could be chasing off, another bald eagle or something that is infringing on the territory. But definitely several minutes, 5-10 minutes at a time seems like forever. But they can stay for quite some time, even up to an hour or two, with no problem at all.
You mentioned visitors to the nest as well, and that's something that we see commonly, not just with the eagle nest, but also with the geese nest as well. And maybe I'll get to that thought later. But Amy, looks like we have a delivery here. You maybe want to talk us through perhaps what this eagle is doing with some fresh nesting material.
Sorry, I want to repeat that one. I didn't quite catch it.
Sorry, we have. It looks like we have a little bit of a delivery on our tremolo nest here with some fresh nesting material. And I was wondering if you wanted to maybe describe, how eagles are constantly refreshing their nest, or what they might want to do with this extra bit of grass and straw.
Yeah, so if you watch them, they work on their nests all the time. It's part of courtship. It's part of, I guess, their compulsion, obsession with fiddling with the nest. So in this case, we've had what looks like some grasses brought in. The eagles will disperse it around. They might build up the berm. It's windy there, so they might build up the berm a little bit to cradle the eggs and protect them from the wind more effectively. It's good for cushioning material. If you have stuff that's getting wet, you can have drier materials. And actually, on really hot days, we've also seen them bring in clumps of grass, or on windy days, and kind of spread them over the eaglets when we have young in the nest. So they bring in nest material constantly, and some of it seems to be to replenish the nest, but it can also be used for insulation, for wind protection, and for coverage.
And to kind of finish one of the thoughts that I had before, the nesting material itself can be quite attractive to small visitors. Sometimes I think, was it last year or the year before, I think there was a grackle pair that was nesting in one of these nests that we had a camera on, and we could kind of follow it at the same time we were looking at eagles. And then also mice too. I know that was a question that somebody asked in advance, and I forgot to put it in my list. But people are often wondering, like, what are the mice doing? I think, they're wondering, are the mice taking this gigantic risk by being next to a bald eagle? And it seems like the mice usually, they're coming out at night, so they're being pretty cryptic. But John, it also, from what we've observed, doesn't look like the bald eagles are, too interested in trying to make a meal out of those mice, at least in those moments.
Yeah, so that is very common. The deer mice, small mice in most all these nests up in the trees, and we've even seen them. Just the other night, I saw one show up in the GSB nest box, and I think it alerted Elaine there. But yeah, so the mice are a common occurrence in the nest, and watchers have even kind of tried to name them M1, M2, M3, depending on how many they see at one time in the nest. Probably not as much activity once the nest is active like this, but people wonder, what will the eagle do? It's typically pitch dark. They're not seeing what we see, because we're seeing an artificial picture that is made possible by infrared light and infrared detectors. So we can see all the detail that's going on there, but they might only hear and possibly see a shadow or something in the dark of night. So you'll see a eagle that's incubating, alert and flap their wings out and make an attempt to drive whatever that is away. They probably have heard that before or seen it before, that it's a mouse. We had such an amazing experience to watch back about, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, where Mom Decorah was in the nest, and there was a mouse that was bugging her during the daylight hours, and we didn't catch it on time at the camera, but since we had multiple cameras recording at the same time, we were able to go back and look at the footage, and she actually had a late afternoon hors d'oeuvre snack by one of the mice that was in the nest. So they will actually eat and consume them if they can catch them.
And that brings up an idea that I think about frequently with other wildlife, risk versus reward. There's a risk for a mouse to be around a bald eagle, but if you're also a mouse, there's a lot of things that want to eat you too. And if you're hanging around an eagle nest, maybe a few of those animals aren't going to take that risk to get up into that area and pursue you. So, wildlife, they're making these calculations, not in the same way that we do, but they definitely are in their own way, I think, making decisions about risk and reward. And that goes for food, and it goes for nesting territories and what you're going to choose too. And we have, maybe about 15 minutes left in our broadcast. We've been talking about bald eagles. We talked about a little bit about Canada geese, but there's been a lot of interesting behavior going on with our peregrine falcons that we've been watching either at Castle Rock or or at Great Spirit Bluff. So maybe we'll turn to Great Spirit Bluff right now. I know the nest box is empty. There's 3 eggs in that right now. But yeah, kind of a lot of soap opera like drama here recently, Amy. There's just a female that's been visiting this territory this spring, Elaine, and Newman, who is the male who's held this territory for a number of years. At first, it looked like Elaine was really rejecting courtship and food offers from Newman, but I think, uh, and she was maybe playing both sides of the river, so to speak. Um, but it seems like she's settled on this nest box right now.
I love GSB. It's not only just a spectacularly beautiful site, but it like brings the drama every year, right? And definitely we're interested in research and conservation, but I can't deny it. I'm just completely here for Newman's season of The Bachelor every year. So last year, Elaine spent the summer with Newman. She was only 1 year old. Sometimes 1 year olds will lay eggs. She didn't, despite, I would say, Newman's very best try. This year she showed up at US Bank La Crosse, which is about 5 miles southeast of GSB, so nothing for a peregrine falcon. And she was visiting back and forth between the nests. She did seem to be spending more time at La Crosse. She was definitely copulating with Artie, the male there. She was accepting food gifts from both males because, sure, why not, right? And she was going back and forth. So when she laid her first egg at US Bank La Crosse, personally, I was like, yeah, this is probably it. I thought she preferred Artie. Here she is. So when she laid her second egg at GSB, it was like, what is going on here? And then she followed up with a, second at GSB, third overall, and then a fourth, right? And those were at GSB. That was fascinating to me because that was one I didn't see coming at all. And then she didn't go into incubation until full incubation until she laid the third egg at GSB, which was interesting to me. I might have looked for it after the second egg because falcons usually go into full incubation at the penultimate or second to last egg. So I think, with all that's going on here, her brain just flipped the switch when she laid 3 eggs here and she's not going to have another one. But another one can't be ruled out if it happens in the next couple of days. And then Artie over at US Bank La Crosse also has attracted 2-year-old falcons. So we'll see what happens there. Elaine's first egg isn't being cared for. Probably won't hatch, but it's the first egg and really never started development, right? So if it doesn't freeze, it's hard to say what's going to happen. But yeah, a great site.
And then in Wisconsin, nearby, we have another nest that we're looking at, peregrine falcons. That's a Castle Rock falcons. So there's Faber and Elsa there. They laid their first egg on, I think, March 29. And this is a new cam for us. So John, yeah, this is a perspective on a peregrine falcon territory that we haven't had on explore.org. Do you anticipate seeing dramatic differences in behavior between these birds? It's going to be pretty much or fairly similar between what we might see at Great Spirit Bluff and as far as like raising and incubating the eggs.
It's different in that it's natural, it's beautiful, it's probably one of the most ideal situations for a nesting area for a peregrine falcon, keeping the rain out and keeping the temperatures buffered by the rock there. So in a way, it looks different. It's one of the eyries that's been used for decades. One of the first ones that falcons that were repopulated back came to in the early 2001, 2002 time period, I believe, was the first when they first returned after DDT. But we'll see a lot of the same activities there, and we've seen some of the same things that falcons see and live through. We've seen predation by great horned owls in the past couple of years at that nest. We've found banded falcon legs with bands on them or bodies. Not something that's fun to talk about, but we see most of same natural life cycle at a natural cliff nest versus a nest box. And these are both nest box nests at Great Spirit Bluff and at Castle Rock. But like I said, there's some characteristics that are different with a rock cliff that just cannot be duplicated by a nest box.
One thing that bald eagles and peregrines have in common is that they begin incubating their eggs kind of like immediately after they're laid. So hatching is staggered. It's not like Canada geese where they generally all hatch within like a day or so. They like a peregrine might have its eggs hatch over several days. Uh, and somebody was kind of wondering about that. Why do some eggs take longer to hatch? In fact, Heidi wrote in on behalf of her students. She was also asking. Heidi was also asking about, why the eagles may or may not eat the mice. So that's where that question came from. But Heidi was also wondering. My students want to know, when do you worry that the eggs will not hatch, and why do some eggs take longer than others? So Amy, maybe I'll throw that to you. You talk maybe just a little bit more about the incubation process and how that begins with peregrines or bald eagles, and how that can affect the timing of hatching.
So I can't really answer the question about why some eggs take longer. My guess might be that maybe a species that's a little larger, more developed at hatch would take a little longer to hatch, but that's a guess. Bald eagles generally start incubation right away. If you think about, they're laying in Iowa, Minnesota, so on and so forth in January and February, right? So they need to begin incubation right away. Although when it's warmer, we see them spending more time off their eggs. And we have seen sometimes eggs hatch quite close together when they're able to do that. Peregrine falcons don't start incubation until their penultimate egg. They generally lay 4 eggs, so it's usually the 3rd egg. But if they're going to lay 5, it's going to be 4, right? So, and they don't start full incubation. But again, if it's really cold out, like they're laying in late March and early April, generally, if it gets really cold out, we will usually see them cover or hover over their eggs. And they do their best, but of course, given that they do have to provide some cover to their eggs, like you pointed out, Mike, like we do see hatches, might be 1, 2, 3 days apart. They might be more staggered or less staggered, depending on the number of eggs and the temperature that surrounded them during incubation. Was it warm or was it cold? So, but in general, they don't have to, unlike geese, have everything hatch in a really narrow window of time. And that's like, it tends to be a little easier, I guess is what I'll say, if you can have the young hatch closer together so they'll be at more similar stages of development as they grow.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that clarification on those differences. So there's a variety of factors that can lead into whether the eggs are hatching near one another or not. We have a few minutes left in the broadcast. There's one question that that maybe we can answer with just a few minutes remaining. KT, let's head back to one of the eagle cams for the remaining few minutes. Let's because a lot of people are wondering about bird flu. Of course, it's affected egg prices in the United States. If you're watching from outside the United States, I don't know what your egg prices are like, but over the last several months, everyone's been complaining that eggs are too expensive, and they are quite expensive. So the bird flu has been terrible for domestic chickens, but it's also terrible for wild birds as well. I'm not sure which one of you want to try to answer this as we listen to this eagle vocalize here, but somebody was wondering, Jackie was wondering, please talk about bird flu in eagles. How does it affect eggs? How widespread is it? Is there anything that we can do about it?
I'll let you take a first shot at that, Amy.
Right. Okay, I'll start, and then John can take over. Because this is something we've talked about and thought about a lot. We've been worried about it. I think it's been on our radar since 2021. And we not only watch eagles, we ban peregrine falcons, so we get very up close and personal with the bird. So we do take some precautions, both to protect ourselves and then not to track if there were bird flu virus flew from one nest to another. Some things we've learned. We did a blood study, I think it was last year, with the Raptor Center on nestling blooded peregrine falcon nests and didn't find anything. That doesn't mean it's not a problem, but that was interesting to see. None of the young had live virus, and none of the young had antibodies they'd inherited from their parents. That makes sense. If the parents hadn't gotten it, they wouldn't have antibodies to pass on to the young, right? But in our golden eagle studies, we've also found golden eagles that had antibodies, and John will have more information on this, but if I remember correctly, two of them were young of the year. So these were golden eagles that would have contracted it either in the nest or very early on in fledging, and they did manage to survive it. And we've seen that in some other birds too. I think there was a pair in Florida. So initially we thought that if a bird got bird flu or highly pathogenic avian influenza, right, it would just die. At least raptors, eagles, and falcons would just die. That turns out to be a little more nuanced than we thought it would be. Having said that, some of our preliminary surveys this year and surveys and monitoring done in other places indicates that it remains a problem. We're seeing that with peregrine falcons. We saw it with eagles a couple years ago, and I think it remains to be seen how this year is going to play out. John, if you have anything to add, that's what I have to say.
Yeah, and it is very widespread, I guess, since it was introduced and came across the Atlantic to Newfoundland. I think 3 years ago, we've seen waves of the effects of avian influenza really hit bald eagles hard and great horned owls hard that first year. Not so much falcons. Interestingly, Raptor Center researchers were noticing from blood samples a couple of years, at least I think it was 2 years ago, that some of the adult eagles that were coming in injured for rehab were testing positive antibodies for avian influenza. So they had survived it. It was really looked at as a death sentence up to that point. It has affected peregrine falcons across this country, although it seems to be much more, has a worse effect on the coastline areas. It's possibly diet related. The researchers on the east and west coast are noticing more losses of adult pairs, significant numbers of losses, where we're not seeing that, at least up to this point, thankfully, in the Midwest. Peregrine falcons in this part of the country, at least along the flyway, are eating mostly songbirds, flickers, others, blue jays, and things like that, instead of the migratory waterfowl like ducks or geese or others that typically can carry and be prolific spreaders of the avian influenza. There were some hot spots in Iowa with Canadian geese earlier this year that we were made aware of, and it got me thinking just the other day about we had that injured eagle that we didn't know if it had HPAI, and then we've got all these geese nesting around in Decorah, and it's just it's really a tough situation, but it makes you wonder, how that is being passed and spread between different avian species and even beyond into mammals.
It's definitely something to keep in mind, and I think if anybody out there likes to feed birds, make sure you're keeping your feeders clean. That's, I think, one really simple thing that we can do to ensure that we're not spreading, avian influenza. There's other steps as well, but and even maybe at this time of the year, think about taking your bird feeders in, because if you live where bears are, they're going to want that bird seed too. But anyway, try to keep your feeders as clean as possible. Clean them regularly if you do enjoy feeding birds at minimum. We're just about out of time today, John and Amy. One final question for the both of you. This is a simple one, but it never has a simple answer. But maybe real quick, what's Amy? I'll throw it to you first. What's one thing that people can do to help not only raptors but other birds in their neighborhoods or across the world?
There are so many potential answers to that. So I'm actually going to give you two things. A woman named Laura Erickson wrote a wonderful book. It's a little older now. I think she wrote it in 2006. It's called 101 Ways to Help Birds. So I really recommend reading it. You can, in your own life, if you have a garden or a yard, plant native plants, plant pollinator-friendly plants. Don't throw stuff on the ground. But I imagine most Explorer watchers already are aware of these things. One thing I encourage people to do is, if you have a neighborhood or regional friends of group, a friends of a park, a friends of a stream, a friends of a river, uh, gardening community focused on pollinators and native plants, join those kinds of groups and engage with other people that are concerned about those kinds of things where you live. Because in doing that and joining your voices and your actions with other people, you really can make an important difference. Take what we do, what Explore does, what you love here, and bring that out into the real world. And that is what I recommend you do. I think you can do that in a lot of ways, but that is a concrete action that can really make a difference. Also,
I love
if you
that.
could donate to us, that would be great.
Right.
Sorry.
I love that. And John, what do you recommend, and where can people go to help out Raptor Resource Project specifically?
Yeah, so I think something that folks can do. The first basic answer to the question, something that comes to mind to me quite a bit because I've been our family has hunted and both you know game bird hunting, small game hunting, and large wild game deer, whitetail deer, and things in the Midwest. So most of the raptors that we take blood samples from have elevated levels of lead, and sometimes it's even up in lethal concentrations in their bloodstream, and that has effect on raptors. That's one thing that I think is could so easily be taken care of with public education and with people just changing their habits with both fishing, but most likely shot for small game hunting. Duck hunting is required to be steel, and there's plenty of alternatives to lead in ammo, but for large game too, and even just how gut piles and things are managed when deer are harvested. So that's a big thing. The other thing I think that's really important that people can do, and Amy touched on this, is habitat management and conservation. There's so much going on with development these days that preserving and trying to not destroy or stay out of areas that are roost areas and things like that with development, kind of a bigger picture, population decision than a personal one sometimes. But even for those who are figuring out what to do with a brand new property and construction and things like that, we had a situation just the other year where somebody was not going to necessarily have a close house built right out on the edge of the bluff where the falcons were, and the setback was brought back several hundred feet. So development and habitat preservation, I think, are a big thing.
Well, I love those thoughts. I think that's a great point to end the program on. And if you want to uh, learn more about Raptor Resource and their work, just go to their website for the Raptor Resource Project. It is raptorresource.org. And I want to thank my co-hosts today for their time, sharing their expertise. I definitely learned a lot about the birds that we've been talking about. So thanks to John Howe and Amy Reese from the Raptor Resource Project for joining us. We'll be back in a couple of weeks for another Bald Eagle and Raptor Resource Project play-by-play. My name is Mike Fitz with explore.org. Thanks for joining us today. And until we speak with you again, as we like to say at Explore, never stop learning. ever since